Kia ora tātou everyone, and good morning, and welcome to the Council meeting of Tuesday the 8th of February 2022. It's a morning of firsts this morning, so it is our first meeting here in the Regional Council meeting room, and want to convey our thanks and gratitude to the Regional Council for allowing us to meet here throughout the next couple of years. And you know, we really appreciate all the help that they've given us. It's also Tony, welcome. It's your first meeting today as acting GM, so good to have you with us. And we've got Anahina here from the Democracy team, and it's her first meeting too. So with that, we've still got health and safety concerns. So if the alarm sounds, please make your way to the nearest emergency exit, which is out the main entrance. Our assembly point is across the road, again, just opposite the main entrance, where we'll wait for the all clear to re-enter. And there are ramps there for anyone who's mobility impaired. Everyone needs to be aware that this meeting is being live streamed. Hopefully, the fingers up at the back, yes, it's happening. And the video will be publicly available on YouTube. Members, remember to speak clearly into the microphones. We've used these microphones before, but they don't have that visual light here, so it's on the base, and only one speaker at a time, and I gather we've got to turn them off as normal when we finish speaking. And if I can just remind everyone to either turn off their their mobile phones, or put them onto silent, and I've double checked mine today. Okay, Shad, can you open with a karakia for us, please?
Morena tātou, tuatahi ka tuku mihi kia tātou katoa. Kia koutou kua tai atina nā mai, ipurangi mai, ki tēnei huihuinga, nō reira tēnā koutou. Just want to reiterate, and welcome to everybody here this morning. So, kia nui tātou. E te atua, anei mātou e koropiko nei mua te warawaro. E te atua ka tuku ngā whakamoime, te ngā whakawhetai ki a koe, mō manaakitanga katoa. Nō reira manaakiti mai mātou, tia ki pai hoki tēnei huihuinga. Kia whai hua hei tika mō tātou katoa. Nō reira tēnei mātou, ene tēnei ki a koe, korore ki tōna. Kia ora everybody, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we start this morning with a very special event, and I'm going to ask our Stephen Burton, if he would come up, please, up here while I read out his little citation. So 1997 was a year of firsts. A computer beat a world chess champion in a chess match for the first time ever. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was first published. Pokemon and the Teletubbies first burst into popular culture. I'm not quite sure how you relate to that, to any of these. New Zealand had our first coalition government, and Stephen Burton joined TCC as a water supply engineer. And I've got in brackets here, and it will become clear as we go through, and George Clooney won People magazine's Sexiest Man Alive, and I think I voted in that. After joining TCC in 1997, Stephen worked as a water supply engineer for 9 years before being promoted General Manager of City Waters in 2006. Back then, the population of Tauranga was approximately 83,300. Fast forward to today, and several restructures later, Stephen's now the Director of City Waters, and the population of Tauranga has almost doubled, now sitting at around 155,000. Stephen, sometimes referred to as the George Clooney of City Waters, has certainly seen a lot of change during his tenure at TCC. And he's played a leading role in these changes too. One of the biggest shifts, in fact, was the introduction and rollout of water meters across the city back in the late 1999, early 2000. This was an initiative that had added at least 10 years to the existing life of our water assets and was a real game changer in terms of management and the delivery of water services. Under Stephen's leadership, and thanks to the capability and capacity that he's built up within City Waters over the years, Tauranga is recognised as having one of the best council water services in the country. What people notice about Stephen when he gets to talking about the topic of water and the water industry, and I think as commissioners will agree with this, is you can actually see his eyes light up and see that this is someone who still has such a passion for his work after so many years. Stephen, it's lovely to have your wife Debbie with us today, and it's a great privilege for me to be able to read that little background, explain what you have done and contributed to Tauranga City over the last 25 years. So please accept this as a token of our recognition of your wonderful service to the city and its community. Kia ora.
Thank you so much.
Over to the.
Are you going to say?
Do you want to?
I'll say just oh my goodness.
Yes.
Goodness.
Yeah. Thanks, Anne, Stephen, and Debbie. Great to have you here. We just thought we'd better leave you with some kind of a memento as well that you can hang up on the wall. Remember, ask your team, the leadership team, your staff, and the executive and commissioners. We've put our signatures on here to remind you that we want you back, after the secondment to the DAA, and we certainly don't want you to be out that creek without a paddle while you're there.
Awesome.
So something for you to remember this occasion by. And this here is how the network has developed. So here's a picture of the water network, the wastewater network, and the stormwater network, and coloured in are the bits that you're accountable for, that have actually gone in since you started here 25 years ago. So there's a before and after, and this comes with a criteria that you need to discuss this with Debbie where it goes in the house, because I can imagine that you would want it above the fireplace. But that might not be everyone's cup of tea. So.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
There you go. Thanks, Steve.
Whoa, I didn't expect all that. Put it down if I may for a second, but I'll hang on to this because I'm getting on a bit. Hey, kia ora tātou, greetings everyone. So nice to hear those message, and I suppose when I arrived 25 years ago, if you'd asked me would I still be working in one organisation for 25 years, I was no way, But I think when I thought about it the other day, I just reflected it really comes down to the opportunities that I've had and the people I've worked with. And yeah, I mean, when we're seeing it like that graphically, we've kind of built probably over $1.5 billion worth of assets in the time I've been here. I haven't done it. Everyone else has done it. And it's been an amazing journey. You work in at the time I joined, everyone said, that's the fastest growing city in New Zealand. And I thought, well, it's going to slow down. But yeah, I'm still waiting. And it's been awesome, all the things that we've managed to do as a city. And I think we are at a crossroads in the future with infrastructure in the country. And I look forward to a lot of young people picking that up because I'm not that young anymore. But I think the other aspect has been the people, coming here as an immigrant, working in an organisation that I've had amazing people I've worked with over 25 years. I was thinking about it. 5 different mayors and 1 commission, which has been pretty cool, actually. The people, whether they're my own colleagues in the organisation, the ones that get up at 2 a.m, fix the system for the community, the consultants, the contractors, tangata whenua who've been very welcoming. Everybody I've been fortunate to have been on the journey has made it great. So to all of you, thank you very much, and thanks for acknowledging this. I really appreciate it. This is great. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah. So we haven't got any apologies this morning. We're all here. That brings us to the public forum, and we have 2 topics this morning in the public forum. First of all, coming to talk to us about the Gulf Road Reserve partial reclassification, we have Alan Goodhall, Margaret Bowditch and Renee McMillan. Is Renee here yet? Yes, she is. Good. Held up in a bit of traffic. So welcome. And if you come, if you'd like to come up to the table here and speak to us, and you've got 5 minutes to talk us through. We have your submissions, so it's an opportunity for you to reiterate the points that you want to make in your submission. Welcome, Alan, just when you're ready.
Tēnā koutou. Ngā mihi kia koutou katoa. Greetings to the commissioners and staff. I'm talking about, as the Mrs. Toy said, the Gulf Road Reserve business agenda item 11.1 has two recommendations, or has three, but recommendation B and C. B, to approve the partial reclassification, and C, to approve the play centre relocation. My submission is on number 144. In the submission, I've taken a neutral position, and I want to explain that in some more detail. Basically, I have real concerns about the process. It seems to me that this piecemeal approach to planning is not consistent with good planning principles. In 2018, there was a major reserves review published, I think, in 2019. Quite a lot's happened since then. For example, the Ormanu Bowling Club is now defunct. The Malmone Bridge Club has liaised with the rescue people to rebuild pretty much on that existing Bridge Club footprint. The former Ormanu Bowling Club is now used as a temporary measure, temporary rooms by the Bridge Club and shared by the Toy Library. So things have changed. Also, there's development pending on the next section at 66 or 64 Gulf Road towards the Ocean Beach Road corner. Traffic volumes have increased dramatically. I've lived down the road for 40 odd years, and to see a traffic jam at the corner of Gulf Road every night, right back to Tweed Street, speaks for the traffic issues there. So my submission really is to step back, as you've done with the Forester Drive walkway. You've stepped back and decided to defer any decision until further investigation is done. And that's what I'm asking you to consider for this Gulf Road Reserve. I'd like a full review of the opportunities there, cognizant of the various needs and requirements. I think somewhere in the report, there's a list of potential users: beach volleyball, community garden, and several others, and there will be more that have interest in that reserve. Any review should look at the various needs and requirements and demands, look at the existing facilities, look for synergies. I mean, who would have thought 3 years ago that the bowling club would have gone and that the Bridge Club would have amalgamated with the lifeguard movement? Nobody would have predicted that. So looking for synergies, looking at the parking issues. It's a council car park with, I think, 58 parks. That's not accounting for any turning areas that the rescue centre will need and behind there, and I'm I guess it's inevitable that some parks will be lost. It serves at the moment as, I think there's some provision for overnight camping parking there, and it serves as an overflow for the Fairway Lodge next door. Traffic flows I've referred to before. There are no pedestrian crossings. There is no cycleway. The footpaths are at minimum width along Golf Road there. Valley Road round the corner has footpath only on one side. So there are some pretty big roading and traffic flow issues to look at. I've referred briefly to the adjacent neighbouring developments. And of course, the ingress and egress from the reserve, coming out of there and turning right towards Ocean Beach Road is taking one's life in one hand, given the dip in the footpath and the dip down and through the berm there. Thank you. So, in summary, I'm asking that you delay it to get it right for generations to come. It's been a reserve since 1952 or something. The leases were, I think, for the Bridge Club were till 2050 something, and for the Golf Club till 2050. So we're talking long term. So to do something, to continue to do these things in a piecemeal fashion is not the way I'd like to see it done.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you.
No, me.
So Margaret? I'll just give you a warning when you've got about half a minute to go.
Well, hello everyone. My submission actually is very much like Alan's, and I wasn't aware that that was what he was going to do. But my name is, as you know, Margaret Bowditch, and I live adjacent to the reserve. My concern is that there has been insufficient consideration relating to the best use of the reserve as a whole. The Play Centre application appears to me to be very ad hoc and has been driven by loss of third-party funding and also expectations of other users wanting their existing site. In the report that's been given to you, which I've read, there's multiple references to further investigations in 2022, so this year, relating to the reserve. They're peppered throughout the report, not all in one place. So these include things like whether the existing ex-Amanu bowling club building should remain or should be demolished. Lots of things about the impact of traffic flows and car parking, given the new building that's due to open, I think, in April. It's the rescue centre in the Bridge Club that Alan referred to. And also investigations about uses for the remainder of the reserve. So surely it makes sense to direct your council experts to let that building open and then assess impacts that it has. And also to more substantially determine the upfront community demand for the type of recreational space that the reserve can provide in its entirety. Once the Play Centre building is there, options are very, very much narrowed and the impacts of it are built in. So now's the time to pause, in my view. In preparation for today, I read up on the city plan and the reserves management plan. I think these two probably need a little bit of reflection in any decision making you're having. The city plan seems to zone it as active open space. And this, in my reading, allows for buildings that could be 15 metres high and 1,000 metres squared. So we could have a 5-storey building on that site. Obviously, I think that's totally inappropriate for the site. In terms of the reserve management plan, the status there is active reserve. This is defined as large reserve primarily used for organised sport. I can only assume that that was given at the time because the Omanu Bowling Club was still operational. But perhaps it isn't as relevant now as it was then. I consider that if the demand from the community for organised sport and recreation for the reserve's current free green space isn't that strong, then consideration needs to be redesignation from active reserve to neighbourhood reserve. Neighbourhood reserve recognises the need for space for casual recreation in increasingly densely populated areas. As Alan said, there's at least one, and I am aware of another one relating to the shops at Omanu that might go ahead and cause my neighbourhood to become even more densely populated. We've all got very small sections, and schools have fenced their field areas, so it's quite hard for families to find a place to kick a ball around. So I think that should be investigated too. In summary, I think there are too many unanswered questions at this stage for the play centre application to go ahead. Things like, is the ex-bowling club building staying or going? What is the community demand for recreational reserve? Is it organised or casual? What is the impact of traffic and parking given all potential reserve uses? Is the reserve classification appropriate? Basically, I don't think that you have been provided with enough information to make a good decision on my community's behalf. To proceed, in my view, would be like building a garage on a section without first having your house plans in place. Therefore, I propose you do not approve the reclassification at this stage, and the next step is to require a more comprehensive analysis from your experts relating to the whole site's future use. The objective of this is to reduce the potential of suboptimal outcomes for our Omanu and Greater Mount Maunganui communities. Thank you.
Ms. Margaret, any questions? Thank you very much. Renee? Morning.
Morena, my name is Renee Smith and I'm speaking today on behalf of Mount Maunganui Play Centre. I'm joined by our President Emily Bailey and Life Member Rita Tustin. We are asking that the Council accepts the staff recommendations to reclassify a 1,000 square metre portion of Gulf Road Reserve and enter a long-term lease with the Mount Maunganui Play Centre. The reason we are asking for these decisions is because Play Centre has been told it needs to relocate from Blake Park and has a long-standing commitment that Council will relocate us to an alternative site. After 16 years of grappling to find an alternative site with no viable options, the Gulf Road Reserve became available. In 2021, the Commissioners approved in principle the reclassification of a portion of the reserve to enable our relocation. I want to acknowledge the support of Council and staff during this process and the gratitude of our members for their work in advancing our project to date. Gulf Road is an ideal location for our centre because it is located in the heart of the Mount community and central to our families. It is currently vacant with no proposal for long-term use. It is flat with existing services. It has vehicle access and off-street parking. It is existing community use and existing buildings, and our proposal would be of similar scale, character, and intensity. The management plan direction is to consider using part of the site for buildings for community organisations, so Play Centre would be an appropriate use of the reserve. In 17 years, no other reserve in the Mount has ticked these boxes. We propose to build an architecturally designed single-storey building behind the Surf Rescue Club that is currently under construction. The scale of our building will be relatively small at 169 square metres, and its design will be residential in character to be consistent with the neighbourhood. The outdoor area will be landscaped and will include an outdoor play space. We are confident that our centre design, the hours of operation, and the nature of our centre will mean we will integrate well with the surrounding environment and cause minimal impact on the area. Play Centre is keen to establish relationships with the neighbours and other park users, including the Surf Lifesaving and the Mount Maunganui Bridge Club, and to work together. At Blake Park, we have built strong relationships with other park users such as the Mount Sports Club, and for many years have supported each other volunteering at touch rugby competitions, social functions, and around day-to-day issues on the park. We're also active members of the Blake Park Users Group. We are aware of the matters raised in submissions following Council's consultation. We consider the high level of community support shows there is wide recognition of the importance of Play Centre to the community and the appropriateness of this location for the new centre. We acknowledge the feedback from Ngāti Kuku and Ngāi Tukarangi and are keen to work with them moving forward. We also acknowledge the concerns raised by submitters. Overall, we endorse the recommendations of staff to proceed with reclassification of Gulf Road Reserve for our new centre and support the recommendations to address the matters raised in submissions. I again want to reiterate the unique nature of Play Centre. Play Centre is a registered early childhood centre and registered charity. We are not a daycare or a commercial operation. We are not a preschool or a playgroup. We are a place where parents and whānau come with their children and learn how to be the first teachers of the children. Our centre is popular and thriving. We have over 90 families and 120 children attending. Our membership numbers represent the significant level of support and demand for Play Centre in our community. I note that many of our members lodged submissions in support of the reclassification, and we have received a huge amount of support from the community through letters of support and donated services to our project. We have had the issue of our relocation hanging over our head for 17 years. Rita's been there the whole way. We feel that the opportunity to relocate to Gulf Road is the last-ditch effort in saving our Play Centre. If the decision is made today not to approve the reclassification or to delay this process, we feel strongly that the continued operation of our centre is at risk. In addition to our own savings of $200,000, we have secured $560,000 of external funding to date for this project, which is time restricted and will be lost should this decision not be made today. If that happens, over 90 families and 120 children will miss out on Play Centre. It is not possible for our members to go to other centres. The Otamotai and Papamoa Play Centre are full and could not take all of our members. It would be a huge loss to the community if we are unable to relocate to Gulf Road. Play Centre is a treasured part of the culture of New Zealand, and many of us benefited from a Play Centre childhood. We want to see that continue for our children and the future generations of the Mount Maunganui community. We also feel strongly that the community wants to see Play Centre to continue to thrive in the Mount. I urge the Commissioners to make the decisions to enable Mount Maunganui Play Centre to continue by way of reclassifying a portion of Gulf Road Reserve and approving a long-term lease for Mount Play Centre. Thank you.
Very much. Any questions? Yep, Shane.
Thank you for your presentation. As a past Play Centre dad, just want to acknowledge, I suppose, the work that mums do in terms of raising our kids. So I just want to make that acknowledgement first. Just a question in terms of parking. There's been a number of submissions that have come through concerned about traffic movements on and off Gulf Road in particular. And understand you've got up to 30 kids occupying the site at any one time, and then up to a ratio of 1 to 5 or 1 to 6. So my question is, in terms of parking on site, how many car parks would the centre require on site at any session, up to, or maximum number of car parks?
Yeah, so our maximum ratio is at place. So we have 30 children, you're correct, on session at any time, and the maximum ratio is 1 to 5. Typically, it is lower than that, so we might have 1 to 2, 1 to 3, depending obviously And we've sort of looked, in 19 seems to be the maximum number of adults we've got on session at the moment. And also it does fluctuate if families are sick or people are away and that kind of thing. We've just done a survey of our members and 65% said they would probably drive to the new centre if it was located there. So I'm trying to do the math. I'm not very good at math. I did work this out and I've forgotten. I think I told Cheryl. Was it 10?
Based on 19, 13, 14,
Yeah, around
13.
maximum 19.
And
Yeah, I did run some numbers and, reading through the report, and I thought it would probably be...
Like if everyone was to drive 19, but yeah, probably 15.
Thank you.
Do you have about, so you didn't finish that, but do you have about 35 to 38% who walk or who arrive either by walking or by cycling?
we did a survey of members if we were to relocate to Gulf Road, and yes, 35% said that they would or cycle.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. 16 years is a long time. 17, even longer. Thank you. Okay, so the second item then is the submitters on Portorifi Parau Farms, and we have Mary Dillon. Is Mary there? Yes. Oh yes, tucked away there. Come on up, Mary. You've got 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when you've got about half a minute to go. Sorry, I'm sure that's going to happen to us too.
So thank you for the opportunity of speaking to you. You know that my submission on Para Farms is one in opposition. So I thought I've already given you my submission, so I thought I'd put that sort of quite briefly in a context and go from there. So the first thing I want to say to you is to take you to your own vital signs survey that you completed last year, and you've obviously got those now up on that nice dashboard where you can see what's going on. So in that survey, you asked people how they thought the city could thrive in the next 10 years, and 41% responded protect green spaces and the natural environment, and another 29% responded protect waterways, beaches and the harbour. So out of a total of 4,900 submissions, 70% said their environment came first, and it's in that context that I'm making my submission to you today. And I think if we just take it for granted that this land is a piece of freehold land, but the intention of it has always been clear, and that is why in the management plan I think there's still a concept plan for it, but it's never been made reserved. That would only have happened when you decided that you're going to use it as a recreation space, unlike its current state. So if you look at the large reserves you've got around Tauranga, these are the ones that you're currently thinking about taking up green space with buildings. The first is Marine Park, which is going to take a very large slice out of if that ever goes through the marine science facility there. Now somebody's talking about Wharapai Domain. They want to take all that green space out to build some wonderful stadium when we already have one at the Mount. We're talking about putting housing on the racecourse. We have Ohauiti on the to sell list, and Tutumu is still very uncertain. So it's in that context, again, that I make the submission that all of our large reserves, or a good slice of them, are actually under threat at the moment. This is probably the prime piece of land in Bethlehem. It's the peak, and in my opinion, that piece of land should be kept for all the public to enjoy permanently. So it should not be something that is simply given over to housing. And inevitably, on that site, despite your agreement with Kainga Ora, or your agreement with them, you will get a fair slice of very high quality. And it doesn't matter. Whatever housing you put on there ultimately privatises the space. And that's something that I'm simply not prepared to support. Para Farms itself, has a long history. We tried to purchase it twice. The second time we purchased it for 3 times what we could have purchased it the first time around, but we got it. And my long-term memory about that is a comment made by the then owner was the reason that he did decide to sell it was because it was going to remain as green space. And whilst that's nothing binding, I think it's a context of what actually happened at the time. As the city grows, we will need more recreational space for people, and we need to be thinking about not just sports fields, but the whole range of recreation with an ageing population, and the opportunities that there is on a site like that to connect it strongly to the Wairoa Valley and to use that land for recreation that isn't necessarily just sports field is a big opportunity for an ageing community, and that community is an ageing community along with every other one in Tauranga. I'm very well aware of the cultural background in the site. I have read Clark's journals at the stage we were going through all the confiscations. I've read Clark's journals and his reporting on what happened to that land, which is simply appalling. So I'm aware of how important it is in a cultural context as well. So my view is, for the city's sake, long term, that site needs to be kept as open green space, not only for recreation, but to make sure that we get good biodiversity in the city, that people have ready access to green space, and that green space is actually high quality. I think the suggestion that the use of prime land for green space is a nullity is just simply nonsense. Your most important sites should be permanently available to the public for green space. And I think that the other set of values is completely wrong. Green space is a key piece of infrastructure. It's a key piece of infrastructure going forward for climate change and for biodiversity reasons and for the straight well-being of the community. So my view is that you should not be using this site for housing.
Mary, any questions for Mary? No? Thank you very much. Right. Okay, so we have one late item that's included in open in the supplementary agenda circulated on Friday, Annual Plan 2022-23 Community Grants Fund. Someone move. Shared bill, we accept that as a late item of business. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. There's no business that I'm aware of to be transferred from the public excluded into open. We don't have any change to the order of business. That brings us to the minutes of the council meeting on the 15th of November. Any comments, any corrections of that? Any questions arising out of that? Someone like to move that is a true and correct record? Stephen, shared second. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Declaration of conflicts of interest. Any to make? None. Thank you. We have no deputations, presentations or petitions. We have no recommendations from other committees. So that brings us to the item 11.1 Golf Road Reserve submission on proposed partial reclassification. Someone going to come and speak to that? Ross. Thank you, Ross.
I'll just kick that off. Atamaria koutou. So as you've heard this morning, staff have been progressing a opportunity to use part of Golf Road Reserve for a different purpose, namely the relocation of Mount Play Centre from Blake Park after 17. I had 15 plus, but 17 years of looking for alternative options. We recently consulted with the public on the idea and received feedback for and against, positive and negative. The report outlines that feedback, suitable responses and proposed next steps. Happy to take the report as read, but have the very capable Ross and Cheryl to answer any questions you may have on where we've got to.
Did you want to make any comments before, or you just want us to ask questions?
Just have to take questions.
Okay. So I think some of the concerns we heard today from the submitters echo some of the concerns we have about the remainder of the park. Fully aware of the long history around the play centre, and I guess from my perspective, when you come to talk about community facilities, play centre's always been for me a community facility. So I have huge sympathy for the long journey that they've had and that lack of uncertainty, etc., and feel that it's quite a reasonable thing to put on a reserve. But I guess from the rest of the park, I have a number of questions as to what's going to happen to the rest of the park. And I think it was Margaret who made the point that we do need to have a look at the rest of the park, whether it's suitable, what's going to happen to those bridge old bowling club buildings. There's no answers to that. Have you got any thoughts about that, or is that something that you've just left completely?
No, we haven't left it completely. We have been exploring uses of the remainder of the reserve, including the Bowls Club building, which is not in amazing condition. Some parties have expressed interest in potentially using that building, and we would need to work through with them how viable and sustainable that use would be in the context of what they're trying to do with it and the condition of the building, the ownership of the building. There will be a process that we've begun to explore the alternative uses of the remainder of the site, right? And we'll have to set up some criteria around that with your input in order to determine what the best use of the remainder of that site is. In terms of the parking and access issue, we're undertaking a parking and traffic assessment of the area. Certainly recognise the concerns of residents. We would look to involve residents in that next phase of work to understand their interests and preferences in regard to the remainder of the site, and likewise we would re-engage with the hapu in that regard. But essentially that's a process that's underway, and we would bring that back to you for your input.
Okay, so I must confess I was a bit surprised that you had started, that you got Becca involved in parking and access, because, I mean, the numbers we've heard this morning, there's been a bowling club there. I don't know what the membership of the bowling club would have been, but it must have been 40 or 50 people. And they would have all probably largely driven and come and played their bowls and parked there. So there's obviously been a lot of traffic going in and out there for the bowling club's activities. The play centre's activities seem to be less of an impact from a traffic perspective. So why didn't you wait until this meeting to talk about it and then go and engage consultants? I guess is the question I have.
Two reasons. One, because we took seriously the concerns expressed through the consultation process. In regard to the play centre, I agree with your assessment. And actually, I think that the time of use is as important as the quantum of use, and is probably complementary at the moment with the other uses on the site. Nonetheless, if there are to be other additional uses on that site in future, then making sure that there is enough car parking, that it's appropriately configured, and that the access to the site is well designed. We thought that it was appropriate to get a traffic and parking assessment done to inform the overall use and function of the site in future.
I would agree with you, but we haven't got there yet, so we don't know what those further uses are going to be. All we're dealing with at this stage is the rescue centre, which is a very large construction, and a play centre. I would have thought that wider work, and that's the point I think that the submitters were making, is that there is no overall plan. So we've got half the plan, and we're going to have a parking and traffic management plan when we don't know what the other half is about. I guess is the point I'm making. I also take the submitters, and commissioners take the submitters' concerns seriously. But part of that is what happens to the rest of the park and how that then impacts on traffic. Anyway, you've answered it, but I think the point I'm making is that I think it would have been better if that hadn't happened until we've actually got the full plan for the park. Then we would have understood all the uses and we could have had a better conversation.
Yeah, okay, take your point, thank you.
Anything else? Bill.
Thanks, Chair. Couple of clarifications, Ross. In paragraph 8, the report notes the proposal's consistent with the reserves management plan, and then in 9 talks about it's not consistent with the current purpose, etc. So just wanting to understand a bit more the consistency with the reserves management plan, given the subsequent discussion on para 9.
I can respond to that. So the reserve management plan identifies Gulf Road Reserve as an active reserve, and then it has management statements that reflect that kind of categorisation of a reserve. And so it's consistent with that side of things, but the underlying classification that sits under the Reserves Act is not consistent. So there's lots of different layers in terms of how we categorise our reserves. There's our reserve categories, whether they're neighbourhood reserve or sport and recreation park. Then there's the Reserves Act classifications, whether it's recreation reserve or scenic reserve or whatever. So in terms of the kind of categorisation that we apply to our network of reserves, it is consistent with that. It's just the underlying Reserves Act classification that it doesn't fit.
But in terms of the rescue base, was there a reclassification for that part, or was that something different?
No, that was consistent with the classification. I think it's just more when you're kind of bringing in the education type facility that that triggered that need. Yeah.
A matter of one Mr. Goodall raised in terms of his commentary on presenting his submission. He talked about the Fairway Lodge overflow. Do I take it that's an informal arrangement as opposed to any formal arrangement with the council in terms of using the car park?
There's no, we're not aware of any formal arrangement around how that car park is used. So there's nothing there around the reserve users specifically using it or any adjacent neighbours or anything. It's just there as a public car park that's not kind of actively managed.
Chad.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this question's for you or potentially for Brendan, but thinking about parking, we have adopted the parking strategy and then starting to roll out the individual parking plans across the city. And so I just kind of want to get an understanding of how this fits into that wider context. So thinking about parking on site, I'm not sure if it's a question for you guys or if it's a broader question for the transport team. And timing of that particular plan.
Not sure I can really answer that. I mean, obviously we'll undertake the assessment of the parking space with the advice of the transport team. My understanding of the way that the parking plans roll out is you essentially survey, determine whether a specific parking plan for a particular location is appropriate, then undertake that plan. Essentially doing a version of that for this site.
I can maybe just help out in terms of timing there as well. So yes, we've agreed to the parking strategy, and the next step is the parking management plans, which we haven't kicked into gear for this area yet. So that's the second area that we will do, and of course take this into consideration. Thank you.
Yes, Michael, I'm just talking to the Chief Executive because I'm a bit like a dog with a bone on this, but I'm just a bit worried about recommendation C, that we approve this, but taking into consideration the feedback and the outcomes of the car parking and traffic assessment. So my initial question was, well, what does that mean? And I guess I'm just a bit concerned that the traffic and the car parking and traffic assessments only being done on half the park, and then we're going to have to come back and do that again when we decide, when we finish that wider plan that we're doing on all the green spaces and how they all fit into one another. We might have to come back and do this again. And what happens if in the middle of all that we find something that's really going to stop us with the play centre? It just all seems to be...
It feels like there's two things there. One, the work that's being done in regards to the parking and traffic assessment will help inform suitable future uses. So, for example, we might understand that with a surf club, a bridge club, and a play centre there, we could still accommodate another 50 car parks and X number of traffic movements per day, and that therefore would lend itself to these types of activities using up the remainder of the space. So, it is useful information to have undertaken the work now, because I think it will help inform future decisions without needing to have 15 decisions on the table and then go and get a traffic assessment to go which one could work. So it's a little bit cart before horse, but I think it's got some value. So that helps inform future use, is my opinion anyway. And then I've forgotten the second thing I was going to say.
So recommendation C, taking into consideration that, what if that assessment says something that impedes the play centre, which we've already made the decision of?
Well, I guess that'd be a fatal flaw, and we'd have to come back and bring it to the table and say, hey, look, this has been brought to our attention as part of the traffic and parking assessment, and we'd have to unfortunately say, pull the handbrake. But I guess based on the sensible thinking around the table, we're talking 13 cars, 40 or 50 bridge club members is quite a large number of people, and all of the people involved in the conversation today think that the use of the play centre is likely to be less than the impacts that are already on site. So I'd be surprised if we got handed a fatal flaw, but not to say it couldn't happen.
So is taking into consideration, are those words what is, because you hear from the play centre they need a decision today. There's a lot of funding that's at stake if we don't make that decision. Is that broad enough that it gives the certainty that they're going to require?
A good question. So I guess my question would be, how long are we waiting for parking and traffic information that then could turn that taking into consideration into a firm yes?
They've indicated it should take about 2 weeks to complete the report, and it will be done within the context of other potential users of that balance of the site. So we know already that there's certain groups that have put their hand up, and there's certainly ideas that have come out of this engagement process. So that goes into the mix as well for them to kind of undertake that assessment. So we can, as Gareth said, we can get an idea of what that means in terms of the use of the remaining part of the site.
So you see, this is where the play centre's been for 17 years. This is the problem from council's point of view. They have had no certainty. I would much rather that we are making a decision today that they can get on with it, and then your traffic and parking assessment takes into account there's going to be a play centre there. Then they can get on with it, and all the other users that want to use that park will have to take their place in the scheme of the process that decides what is in the rest of that park. I just think we're going round and round in the same circles that the play centre's been in now for 17 years.
So on that basis, Madam Chair, I'd suggest that the recommendation stops at the word negotiations.
I'm happy to move that.
I'm happy to second, but I just want to clarify. a second, but I wanted a clarification that if the reclassification goes ahead, do I take it that there is no need for any subsequent resource consent process for the play centre?
No, because the classification is done under the Reserves Act and the resource consent is done under the RMA. So it's looking likely that under the RMA and the city plan, and we will need to investigate this further, as a land use activity, it seems to be permitted. So it'll be subject to, all those permitted activity conditions. But where it kind of comes in that it might require resource consent is around two factors. One is it being identified as a flood prone site. So we need to kind of work through what that actually kind of means and do a site assessment to determine to what extent it is, and also around potential site contamination as an outcome of the bowling greens previously being used as, with chemicals and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
It'll just be helpful, and the play centre may know all of that they're well aware that this is not the end of the process potentially. So, and because we agree to reclassify, other processes potentially could create some difficulty.
I think they're well aware of that, yeah.
I'm happy to support the proposed amendments, but I'm actually thinking about whether or not we need a D, because our submitters have been very clear, and I think they make a good point, that we don't have a clear understanding of where we're going with this reserve. We've got some ideas about what that might look like, but it's quite nefarious about what the process for that is. And I think we need to get some sense of by when will we be in a position to know what happens with this reserve? What is the plan? And so I'm thinking a D that might say something like request to advance plans for the future use of the reserve by X date. I don't know what that date should be, but I suspect it should be, I'm thinking within 6 months or something like that. Perhaps the staff could give us some suggestion as to what time frame might be, so that we can give all parties some certainty about what's happening with this reserve.
Through you, Madam Chair, it might be helpful if there was an explanation as to how the review of this reserve fits into the wider review of reserves, particularly in that part of the city.
I think you're referring to the review of active reserves that we're undertaking. Yes, that will certainly account for that through this process. We should have bang up-to-date numbers on supply and demand and related matters in the next couple of weeks. In terms of the process that you're talking about there, Stephen, I would say give us 2 months to bring something back to you for an initial steer as to preferred uses of the remainder of the site. Or 3.
I was going to be kind and suggest 3. So the mover and seconder would have to be happy with my suggested amendment, but it is D, request staff to advance plans for the future use of the reserve within 3 months.
Certainly happy to include that. I'd ask, that was what I was asking the Chief Executive, whether we needed. Okay, so we've got that. You happy with that? Seconder happy with that? Any further discussion? Okay, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Right, that brings us to Portarefi, Para Farms, consultation outcomes. So the recommendations there, so we're still having a discussion with an iwi to get their aspirations for the site that recognises the. Oh, sorry about that. It's exciting, isn't it? So who's going to speak to us on this? Andy.
I have Angela with me. Angela from the Property Group is a consulting helping us with this project, and Carlo as well. They wish to chip in, and you can say Carlo, of course. Just firstly, wish to acknowledge the iwi and hapu in this area, and the way we're now referring to the land as Puteriwhi instead of Parau Farm, to recognise how they refer to the land and the values they have there. So just to begin with. Just in terms of the purpose of the report, obviously not looking to move too far with this project. In terms of the recommendations we have in front of you today, really this is just to bring the consultation outcomes to you for your information and acceptance, and with a further report to come in due course once there's been further engagement, particularly with tangata whenua. There is one late submission for your consideration and a second late submission, which has been received in January, which will be distributed. Coral, I believe, has some copies. So we just ask that you consider how you wish us to address that submission. That submission is against the proposal and for similar reasoning as many other submissions, so it doesn't really introduce anything particularly new into the process. And really, that's pretty much all I have to say. I'll just briefly hand over to Angela, who will just quickly cover, I guess, the key kind of pros and cons that have been raised by submitters.
Morning. The consultation period ran from 15th of November to 15th of December last year, including the late submission today. We received 159 written submissions. Approximately 2/3 of the submitters opposed the proposal and 1/3 were in support. Ngāti Kahu responded to the consultation. They advised they were not in a position to meet the deadline for submissions, and they affirmed the cultural and ancestral significance of Puteriwhi. Obviously, the hapu has subsequently met with the commissioners in this regard, and engagement's ongoing. A number of key themes were identified from the submissions that we received. From the submissions in opposition, there was a need to understand how or where sports fields would be provided. Concern expressed regarding the loss of green space on the local amenity. It was existing infrastructure, roading, local services already at capacity. The city, and particularly Bethlehem, needs sports recreational space as much as housing, and concern regarding the type of development and residents. In terms of the submissions in support, the key themes were, again, the city needs both housing and sports recreational space. We're looking for intensification and mix of housing opportunities, including green space. They noted that the site was well located, close to schools and shops, and there was a need to ensure that cultural areas were protected and enhanced any development. We received 4 submissions that were neutral. Again, identified the need for both housing and sports recreational space. There was questions around how a commitment to biodiversity, climate change and future growth would be delivered on, and identified the need to work with schools and the Ministry of Education to manage potential role growth. So the staff responded to those themes within the body of the report.
Any questions? Phil?
Just on page 45 of the agenda, in terms of the documentation that was used for consultation, the land that's shaded in yellow, I just wanted a bit more teasing out of its land to be retained. Obviously, TCC at some stage have purchased that. What's envisaged for that piece of land, and has any consideration been given to in terms of its particular use?
Speak to that. So that land is relatively low-lying land in the floodplain of the Wairau River, therefore unsuitable for housing development as such. It was bought, I guess, to add to that broader Parau Farm land holding in the past. So consideration is being given to whether it could be developed in any way into some form of sports field still, although that may be difficult. But there is Bethlehem College nearby have developed a sports field on similar low-lying land, but also in terms of its use as passive reserve, but certainly it will be used for stormwater management from the broader Bethlehem area. There are also streams and wetlands in there, so considerations under the government's new freshwater reforms.
Just as a follow-up, Chair, then, given what you have outlined, Andy, was there then any discussion in terms of the engagement about what the potential be for that? Was it in effect part of the story that went out for engagement and discussion? Because it actually, what's that potential in one form or another, I would have thought has some significance to the overall consideration of this matter.
I guess that was part of the story, but not probably a key aspect of that story that we sought to really focus on. So perhaps some of that opportunity may not be fully understood in the community.
Thanks, Chair.
So this process is proceeding for the reclassification of the Portarifi site, what's known as the Portarifi site. What part of that process does this yellow shaded land, are we going to be considering that in total, or is that a separate process? And if it's separate, what's the timeline around that?
So we're not considering, I guess, the disposal of the land in yellow, so it is slightly separate. It is being considered at the moment through that broader review of the sports field network, and we'll come back through that process.
Just a question in terms of the connection. So just on page 44, and I do recall seeing a connection across the river margin. Does that yellow piece, does it connect into esplanade reserves along the river margin?
Yes, it does connect into the esplanade reserve and provides it access to the river.
I guess following up on that, I just wonder about the hapu, whether they're aware of that extra piece of land too, and the possible future use of inclusion of that. Has that been part of the discussions with them?
Kia ora. No, not as far as I'm aware, hasn't been included in it. But as you know, that's quite early discussions and sort of having that interaction between council and the hapu about what those aspirations across that area could look like. So we'll make sure that they're aware of that and that it's part of the discussions and their considerations.
I think that's quite important. Yeah. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I'm reasonably happy with the recommendations and happy to move them. But I think in doing so, my observation is, having read through all of the submissions that we have received, they raise a whole range of very valid concerns and questions that, in making any decision for this to go to housing, in my view, need to be addressed. You've got transportation access, what the future development of the land might look like, and I guess most importantly, the question of how will the provision of green space and reserves be provided into the future. And I think that's at the heart of many of the concerns. In fact, even when you go through those who are supportive of the use of this land for housing, there's a whole bunch of if, buts and maybes and tags associated with that support, very consistent with those who are opposed. And so we need to have answers to all of those questions because they are valid questions. And I would have hated to have been in the situation where I was being asked today to make a decision based on the information that we have at hand. I just do not think we have sufficient calibre of information about how traffic's going to be managed, what the future use and what the design of land might look like, the level of density, and then issues around connection through to the river and the big question about the reserves. Those are all really important questions. And I think, to me, what it's almost like our Gulf Road conversation as well. We're kind of putting ourselves in the position of making incremental decisions without a very clear understanding of what the overarching strategy is. So I want to get on as a commissioner and make decisions so that this council can progress. And I don't want to hold up decisions because we haven't done the overarching plan if the decision is clearly evident. But I do consider that there needs to be a much more strategic approach going to these kinds of decisions of what we're seeing here, and that we need to accelerate our reserves decision making or strategy development. And we need to be able to set out a plan that when we seek to make a decision, it's in the context of a wider understanding of what we're trying to do and why. And I just don't see that coming through in these decisions we're getting. We're being asked to consider. This is a really important one. Housing is mission critical for us. We've got a statutory obligation to meet our housing urban policy standards, and we need to get on and do that. But we can't just do that in isolation. We have to understand what the wider impact, and I think we need to speed up the pace of work so that we can see that overarching story as well. Observation. Sorry, at a long commentary, but I think it's really important.
You're moving the recommendations. You're seconding. Oh, we've got so we've got to accept. So I think we've already got those up there. Yep. Can I ask then, given that we've still got discussions with the hapu happening, what is and that's sort of looking like mid to late March, what is the timeline for the wider review of sports grounds and active reserves? Are we on the similar timeline?
Yes.
Two key pieces of work that are also going to link into it. So one is the Greaton Racecourse Golf Course project, which is going to come to you, and as you're aware, one of a number of those 7 options have within that active recreation as a possibility. So that lines up with this timing. And the other one is you've still got Smith's Farm, which is currently what you're saying is if Tauranga doesn't proceed for sports fields, then you were going to relocate that into Smith's as a holding position until the wider review was done. So that's where that's currently sitting. So that's your transfer, if you like, until there's the wider review, which is why there was sort of this concept of a decision being able to proceed on Tauranga, knowing that there was an alternative, but potentially not the best alternative, and that was going to be covered into the wider review. So that timing should all line up.
Yeah, it needs to be, but from the Bethlehem side of the city, I hope that Smith's Farm is not going to be our only option. And certainly the racecourse doesn't fit into that either. Chad.
Yeah, just kind of picking up on that point in terms of that piece of work. Hopefully it looks at and addresses some of those long-term kind of challenges around future use of and identifying future opportunities for active reserves across the city. So, while we're looking at all the current, but actually as the city grows, how are we going to accommodate that into the future, 20, 30, 40 years out?
cross-boundary, of course. Bill seconding. Stephen's moved and Bill's seconding. And we've got late submissions, both from Sport Bay of Plenty and Rob Patterson received in that. Any further questions or discussion? All right, we'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you. That brings us to 2023, 11.3, annual plan issues and options, spaces and places. Gareth and Paul.
I'll hand over to Paul, but just wanted to put on the table, I'm just trying to find it, that we're keen to table an amendment or suggest an amendment to recommendation A, that says, just adds the words and notes the following resolutions for inclusion in the 2022-23 annual plan process. So I've sent those to Coral, just to kind of tie any decisions today made into the broader annual plan process, just for clarification's sake.
Paul, if we take them one at a time? Yep.
Atamarie Koto, just to introduce, Warren, Team Leader for Environment, and Anna Hancock, who's the internal project lead for both the Elizabeth Street and the Ormanawa projects, just if you don't know who she is. Thank you. So we have 4 areas today that we're going to discuss. As Gareth noted, adding information, adding in principle additional funding into the annual plan process for consultation that will go through the winter, actually, for agreement in late June. The first one is on Ormanawa Falls, where we're asking you to underwrite the additional funding of 2.72 million, noting that we're still in the process of seeking additional funding from potential external funding partners, but actually need to get the consent process completed before we can go through that. So this is the first one discussion, obviously open to any questions that you have on the Ormanawa Falls project.
Yeah, I think my question was around exactly that point. So just trying to get my head around why we have to put the whole amount into the budget when we're sort of counting on up to 50% from partners. Why do we have to do that? Why can't we just put 50% in?
Well, we're trying to ensure that we have full funding for the project. So what we're asking for today is to add it into the annual plan for a consultation. In the meantime, between now and the end of June, when that consultation process is over and you're making the decisions about the annual plan, we should be in a position where we know a lot more, because the consent hearing is April, I think, mid to late April. We'll get a decision then in May, and then at that point we can go and have the proper discussions with those external partners around the funding that they may provide to us. But we're sort of in that middle ground at the moment. We want to give the project some certainty, but we can't give it that certainty until we've had those discussions with external partners, and we can't do that until we have the consent process completed, which was delayed due to having to publicly notify, and then we are in consultation with or conversation with Western Bay at the moment to iron out the final few questions that they had.
So the intention would be by the time the annual plan's signed off, we will know how much funding we've got from external partners and adjust the budget.
Yeah, we will know. We will have some certainty as to the additional external funding we will have from some of those external partners, and we will be in a process where we would have applied for some too. So lotteries, for example, will be able to apply, and we'll be waiting for the outcome. I assume it's still at the end of June, but for other external partners, we've already started those conversations, but they've explained to us that they can't give us any certainty on that until we have consent.
Just got a question about the options or the alternative options. In terms of option 2 and option 3, does that still deliver those safety benefits of access down to the falls?
So it delivers safety to view the falls, the waterfall itself from the top. So option 3, which is the original safe access option, is basically a path to a viewing platform at the top. Option 2 is additional to that, so more platforms, but very little mahi toi, a basic car park and no changes to the building. Option 3, which is our recommended option, which is the option that we've been working through the co-design process with Ngāti Hangaro and TBOP, Tourism Bay of Plenty, actually is the full 3 platforms to the water, but no access to water. The car park with 77 spaces, the building being updated for use, and the full mahi toi as agreed with Ngāti Hangaro.
It's option 1.
Sorry. Yeah, apologies, reverse those. Option 1, not option 3.
My question really relates to the ongoing operations and the ability to fund those as much as the capital projects itself. So we've got 6 million-ish up front for the capital. We're going to have about 3 million over the 10 years in operational costs. We're putting in quite a bit of, I guess, capability with physical presence of people on site and those sorts of criteria. So have we considered the option of commercial charging or revenue streams coming in to help fund not only the capital costs, but the ongoing operational costs? And should that not be part of the funding that we are seeking to provide? So it could be charging for access, or it could be charging opportunities for commercial tourism. And given that, I would expect tourism will be a major user of this site. It's an opportunity to bring some revenue in to help fund the amenity that's being provided, rather than the ratepayers having to carry the burden all the time.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. And actually we have, so a peer review was undertaken in 2019, and that suggested that Tourism Bay of Plenty, Ngāti Hangaro and Tauranga City Council came together to have a co-design process for this project. So Tourism Bay of Plenty are working and supporting Ngāti Hangaro through just that, really. So we are focusing at the moment on delivering the safe access to the falls, because we have a responsibility as landowner to make sure that we are minimising the possibility of a health and safety risk, which we do have there. While at the same time, we're in the relatively early stages of working with Ngāti Hangaro, Tourism Bay of Plenty, to look at the commercial opportunity that could be there, and how we may look at how both the ratepayer and as landowner can benefit from that too. So that is definitely something we're working on, but we're in the early stages of it. There is a commercial part to the project itself, but we're focusing mostly on currently on the delivery of the safe access to the falls itself.
So I think it is important. I mean, my particular focus is on the potential recovery as landowner rather than recovery to support tourism commercial initiatives. And I just wonder whether or not we might consider that C be amended so that it reads something like this: notes that officers are in the process of seeking funding from potential partners, and I would add, including the potential for charging and opportunities for commercial tourism.
It's consistent with the activity we're undertaking. So.
Because you would need to, if you're thinking about that needs to be an important part of the design of it, so that you can actually differentiate between those who are just coming to have a look at the waterfall and those who actually want to then go and take part in the wider experience, I guess. Yep. So are you moving A, B and C with that change. Thank you. Chad, you second? Any other discussion on that? Get up on the screen what we're... I think we'll do them individually, one at a time. Does that mean the camera's not on? Just wondering why we have a screen looking like that and like that. The mysteries.
Shall I go? Oh.
Just double check that wording there, including the potential for funding and potential tourism operations. Is that what
He wants to take out partners. So note that officers are in the process of seeking funding from potential partners. No? Yeah.
potential partners, including potential for funding? So what do you mean potential?
He's got a lot of potentials.
Including
The potential for funding is right. It's the tourism. We don't need the potential with tourism operators. Yeah, which if successful will reduce the rates in there. You happy with that?
You're just doing
Yeah. Yeah, so that makes it clearer. Yep.
you just wanted to be just doing A, B, and C.
Yep. Happy with that? Right. I'll put that then. That's A, B, and C on the Omanawa Falls. Well, it's A, receiving the report, and B and C on the issue of Omanawa Falls funding. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Next issue is the destination skate park, which has become a destination skate park. In that long-term plan, it was a skate park, wasn't it? Was it a destination? Was it?
Yeah, so we've got under number 28, we've got the resolutions from it, and it does say destination skate park in resolution C. So since the LTP decision last year, where we asked for £670,000, sorry, still very English, $1,000 for a destination skate park, we've actually gone off and done quite a lot of engagement, huge amount of engagement responses actually, and a huge amount of interest across the city for a skate park, a destination skate park. Hugely positive. We have also talked to other councils across New Zealand to understand what the costs are, and we feel that we probably undercooked the amount of money that we actually need to deliver a destination skate park. So our options are really around, if we do want to do a destination skate park, then we need to put more money into that. And we need to put that out again in the annual plan consultation to say we, in principle, would need $2 million to deliver a destination skate park. Does the community support that? And if they do, then we're in a position to start building one. We are also noting that we are suggesting that we would 50-50 split the cost, so that the council pays 50%, and we are pretty confident we can get external funding for a skate park of 50% based on conversations we've had with other councils across New Zealand, and the fact that they have also been pretty successful in this. So today, we are giving you an update on the engagement and the positive responses we've had, and suggesting that we also add that to the annual plan consultation too.
I found it fascinating that obviously the age range is huge, and I sort of saw it as something to keep that younger adolescents engaged. But clearly, with a requirement for car parks, and some of the people that appear in front of us in the long-term plan, they keep skating for a long time. Yep.
Well, my question is it enough? Because what our considerations today are all about adding extra amounts to decisions that are largely already taken, committed. And there is a sort of a tendency for scope creep going on, which is causing us every time to go back and ask for more money. I think the key question is this enough? If we're going to go out to the ratepayers, we may as well ask them the question. If it needs to be more, we should have that in there. And I think we also need to understand, what the scope of this might look like, rather than just a level of uncertainty. Because as soon as there's uncertainty, there's scope creep, and then there's budget increases, and I want to avoid that.
On your second point, noted for sure. On the first point, the numbers that we're presenting today are with QS, and we've had conversations with other New Zealand councils who have delivered something similar in size to what we're suggesting for that budget recently. So that's what we based it on. So we think it is enough. But so today, yes, we do. We do think it's enough.
The father of 2 skateboarding sons and now one 11-year-old skateboarding daughter. Yeah, I just in terms of my question, I'm not a skater. It used to be they can drive now, so they can get to the skate parks by themselves. But I suppose my question is, in terms of identifying a location, a destination skate park, just hope ideally that we're kind of connecting in with all of the other activities that occur in those locations. Things like public toilets, like trees and shade, and those kinds of things, just so we don't get to a point where we've found a location and then we've got to provide car parks, we've got to provide toilets, we've got to provide all this other drinking fountains, all these other additional things. And just in terms of the criteria and the scope, in terms of identifying these key locations, that we're maximising the opportunity in those key areas.
So on item 42, where we have the high-level response to some of the engagement, actually all those things you noted are key to what residents told us, what the skating community told us. So that on that basis, we've looked at the best locations in the city for a destination skate park, and we've landed on 3 separate areas, and we're currently in the process of working those up a little bit more based on the sort of amenities that you need, not just for the skate park, but in the local area, to be able for people to feel comfortable that they have all the things they need when they're going skating. So yeah.
Chair, I mean, that's the guts of my question. So is that included in that extra amenity? Is that included in the 2 million?
It is because the 2 sites we are looking at already have a number of those other pieces of amenity, so toilets, parking, etc. We're looking at 2 sites. There's 3 areas. 2 of them are in one site and one other site, and they both already have most of those amenities. That's why we're saying it is.
Yeah, through the chair, prior to signing off the annual plan, we'll be able to provide a level of detail which will give you greater, I guess, confidence in the number and more detail. So that gives us 3 or 4 months of further work on this, which will give us a lot more detail by the time you sign off.
Including the recommended site, so then you'll be able to see where it is. We're just finishing off the process for that.
And how are you managing all the hundreds of disappointed people who are not involved in the co-design?
And that was good, wasn't it? We had 200 and something people that wanted to be part of it, which was so positive. We'll let them be involved, not in the day-to-day meetings, but they can still feed into us their thoughts as they have through the consultation or engagement process, actually.
It was a serious question because that's outstanding that there was that level of commitment, if you like, of their time and energy, and want to keep them engaged. All right, so is someone prepared to move D? Shad? Second by Stephen. You've got a question, have you, Shad? No? Just rubbing your eyes. Okay. Any further discussion on that? So we're agreeing to increase the project budget to a total of just over 2 million. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. That brings us to mulching around trees. I'm sure that Bill is looking to propose that. Did you want to say anything first?
No, I'm happy to listen to comments. It's self-explanatory, this one, really.
What areas this additional budget would cover, it gives Cameron Road as an example where there's a need for mulching because of weeds growing up, tree trunks. But do I take it this proposal only relates to parks and reserves? The report gives one indication that it does, then it uses an example of Cameron Road and road berms.
Let me introduce Mark, who's the the supervisor for the urban foresters.
Hi everyone. What we're looking at is basically any area that we actively mow. That's where we're getting the mechanical damage that we're trying to avoid as a spec. So reserves and then streets like Cameron Road and Monganui Road are examples.
Okay, no, thanks for that clarification. So certainly I'm delighted in terms of the proposed increase in the level of service, and I think we're on the right track. There's probably across the board, though, opportunities for increased level of service and a whole range of things related to parks and reserves, and we'll come to that obviously in the annual plan process, etc. And if there was one issue over the Christmas break that I had the most comment around was in terms of the maintenance of the parks and reserves and road berms in this city. So, and people were comparing us with other cities they'd been to, which for a range of reasons have quite a higher level of service than what we currently have. So well done, really keen in terms of how that may translate in terms of on the ground. So that's all I had to say on that, Chair.
Have a seconder? Shad, happy to second. Any further discussion? Questions? No? All those in favour for, I've lost my page now. 3. So it's E, increase the operational budget by 175,000. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. That brings us to Elizabeth Street upgrade.
So we're basically coming to ask again for additional funds to be added to the annual plan consultation to ensure we've got enough contingency to complete the Elizabeth Street streetscape project due to delays, which are delays in the overall Elizabeth Street project, which are having an impact therefore on our Elizabeth Street streetscape project, if that makes sense.
So my question is, have we had any conversations with the developers? Because it is their delays that is causing our ratepayers an extra $500,000 worth of costs, possible costs. So, I understand COVID and the delays that it's causing everywhere, but actually we're taking all of that and our ratepayers are taking all of that, and that doesn't seem to be very fair to me.
Yes, we are. We're currently in a conversation with Hawkins and the board of Hawkins to really understand who should be paying for the additional the impact of the program having an impact on our project. So yeah, we are in those negotiated conversations at the moment. We're asking for the contingency to make sure that we've got enough funds to finish the project at worst case currently, though this project does feel like there is never an end, because there is never an end to the wider Elizabeth Street project, which is difficult. So I know that Hawkins are also in conversation with farmers about this too. So it's quite a long, difficult conversation that we're having, and we are being supported by our QS to go through the numbers in detail to ensure that we hopefully get to a negotiated compromise position that we can then agree and move on.
Just through the chair, also, we just talked at the governance group last week about changing the way we deliver the rest of the project to minimise cost. So at the moment, we're established on site in quite a few different locations. What we talked about last week was finishing the part that is nearly finished, finishing the roundabout that will be finished by the end of the month or end of March, and then pulling out of the site for a period of time. So rather than incur ongoing P&G costs, pull out, wait till farmers have genuinely got rid of the cranes, got rid of the scaffolding, then go in and finish our bits in a quick hit. So we're just looking at other options like that to try and minimise cost because of the very fluid environment.
And I'm, aware that it's not just costs, the disruption to traffic at a time when there's a lot happening in that area with Cameron Road. So the ratepayers are also bearing that sort of cost as well. So I'm pleased to hear you're thinking of that, because it really is very difficult. And I witnessed it over Christmas in particular. It made it very, very difficult for people. Okay, that's fine. You've got a question, Shad?
Yeah, just thinking about the contingency, the 12.5%. When I was going through the report, I didn't understand how we came to 12.5% and how that was calculated in terms of the 462,000. Are you able to clarify that?
Kia ora koutou. So working with our QS, they advised us of the cost to complete, and worked out the 12.5% of the cost to complete. So I don't have the number on me what the cost to complete was, but they said this is the number from this month on until we're completed. This is how much we're estimating that's going to cost. What's 12.5% of that? We did play around with different percentages. What is the right amount? Because as the months go by, we get a new deadline which changes almost monthly. And at the moment, we don't have a date that we're working towards currently. We're waiting to hear from farmers when they anticipate that they'll be finished, so that we can then start working in the space that they're currently occupying. Does that answer your question, Chair?
And QS is quantity survey, for those who are listening in that don't understand the lingo. Yeah. Any other discussion? Someone then prepared to move, what are we up to? F and G, increasing the budget and the deferring of the budget from 2022 to 2023, part of that. Thank you, Bill. Stephen, second. Thank you. Any further discussion? Reluctantly. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. So that brings us to item 11.4, tsunami sirens. Kia ora. Paula, welcome.
Kia ora all, and good afternoon. So
The report you have in front of you is covering two items. Firstly, a summary of the project, the Tsunami Awareness Project that was undertaken over December and January in the community, the affected community. So what you have in front of you is a summary of where the project was at as it was sort of wrapping up, but also notes that the Tsunami Awareness now goes from a specific project to business as usual, and Paula and her team have included that into their annual work plan for the coming year, but also to request a formal resolution from you to put this into consultation during the annual plan. Paula is here today, and she might be able to give you an update, I guess, of the general feedback we're receiving from the ambassadors. The report was due before we've been able to formalise that feedback, but I'm sure Paul will be able to give you an update on that and answer any questions. Thank you.
I think we would like to hear. Yep. Thank
Good day, everybody. Madam Chair, Commissioners, Marty, and members of the Executive. So as Barbara has said, the project wrapped up on the 31st of January, just prior to the submission of this report. General feedback, the messaging was really well received, a lot of interest in the messaging. Concerningly, some members of the public thought we already had sirens, and more concerningly, some had heard them. So that was somewhat concerning. There was a vocal minority group who seemed to be more vocal on social media, more specifically our Facebook postings, but us are far in the minority in terms of just wanting council to get on and put the sirens in. But over the whole project, very well received. I'm really satisfied with the extent of saturation of the identified area that we started off looking at. And our working group has been really instrumental in our reach into those spaces as well. There has been some learnings which we will look at through the month of February and start putting a plan together in terms of this becoming business as usual for us. That has become very clear. We're needing to make sure that this is part of an annual plan and the things that sit on the periphery of this as well, which have come up through this awareness campaign. And the only other thing that wasn't in the report is that we also intended to be part of a wānanga November, December last year with a number of marae that have put their hands up and said, we want to continue to work with you around preparedness. They initially were part of the Kia Takatu program that we did mid-year, which finished October. And unfortunately, due to COVID, that has been delayed, but we are hopeful that that will be put together soon, and the tsunami awareness will be an agenda topic at that wānanga as well.
Thank you. So the two questions that I have is, firstly, through the process, have you identified through that wider reach out into the community where the vulnerable areas are, but the vulnerable groups are? And then secondly, I live in Papamoa Beach Road. Where will I find out where I go, what I do? So what is the plan? If it's business as usual, what is the plan, and how's that going to be communicated to residents like me?
With regards to that being part of our ongoing work, so there is nationally a tsunami working group that has been formed at NEMA level, as well as the tsunami expert panel that has been formed as well. And they're looking at all things tsunami, and I'm saying this more specifically around inundation modelling. They're looking to make some consistency through the country around what modelling we base our evacuation routes on. And most recently, we've been asked we've been consulted on, do we want a single blue line? Do we want to keep the three colours? So there is a bigger piece of work at play at the moment, which would be wise to collaborate with before we make some of those decisions ourselves. So that will be part of our career staff working. We have taken on today our resilience advisor start, so this will be a large part of his work. But 2 weeks back, we had an advisor start, and her main focus will be being part of these working groups, looking at the bigger picture insofar as doing a lot more research that will underpin some of the decisions that we need to make. At a local level, the group has also employed a senior advisor, tsunami readiness. So we'll be working closely with her as well, Melinda Meads, who has come down from NEMA. She's Auckland-based. So I suppose my my response, Madam Chair, is that at this point we're needing to collaborate before we just go ahead and make some decisions about what that looks like. Once we have some consensus in terms of consistency, that will inform what we do next, and it will be rolled out again through the community by our advisor that we have. There has been significant development down Papamoa East, which has impacted on our evacuation zones. We had GIS update those into those maps that we did give out, but there is some further work to be done around safe zones, etc. So there is a much bigger piece of work that has fallen out of this awareness project, which we're very aware of and will certainly form part of with some urgency in terms of getting on top of that. And how do we keep our working group involved as well in terms of informing, because they have helped us identify those vulnerable communities, whether they're the elderly, whether they're the schools, whether they are disadvantaged populations that do reside down there. There are lots that do reside in that space, sort of the Kainga Order homes as well, which we've seen when we did a project in Gate Park and Greerton, maybe being maybe looking at readiness is not necessarily a priority for them. So certainly there would be a different approach for each of the communities that we know exist through that working group. We've had really good support and interest from Red Cross, who are very keen to get down in there and do the Good and Ready project down there. We're in discussions at the moment with that, where it will be door to door. So we're very keen, and they ran the Gate Park Greerton Good and Ready project, and this is some of the feedback that we did get from them. So suffice to say, it's a big piece of work that we're still needing to do. But we certainly need to be doing that in collaboration with what's going on within our region, and it's what's going on nationally. So we do have some consistency, and that people that live here but travel elsewhere are not going to meet different things in different areas around how they keep themselves safe from tsunami, for example.
And also that liaison with the various marae, because I think I know where I would head. It'd be straight to the marae at the back there, up in Highland, which is what happened in February last year or March last year, whenever it was, beginning of March.
And I think probably sometime in March, we are due to give some feedback into that. I think GNS Science has asked for that insofar as why community did that, what motivated them to do that, etc. So even insofar as that, there is a piece of work being done so we can collectively look at all these things and make some informed decisions what's best for our community.
Last question, and then I'll open it up. I just want to be clear that we're consulting as part of the annual plan, not the long-term plan amendment. Is that right? It's just part of the annual plan.
Correct.
Stephen.
My question just builds on yours, really. Do we have any insight into how long that process of identifying the future plan will take? These things tend to run on, and we don't want to get caught short.
At this point, my focus would be on expediency, but I can't tell you what that looks like at the moment. Suffice to say that the person that has started at the group has been brought on at a 2-year fixed term, but we can't wait 2 years. So insofar as what that looks like, excuse me, for us locally, my intention is that it's not going to take that long, but at this point, I can't give you an exact time frame. There is a bit that sits behind that we're needing to consult on.
I think the issue was that last time people didn't know what to do, and part of the learning was that we needed to get that sorted. So we don't want to get caught again. So it may mean that whilst we can contribute to that wider discussion, we have to come up with an interim strategy or plan and communicate that. And then my second question really goes to item 7 on page 183, which refers to the 40 to 75 minutes before our local region advisors can make an informed decision about whether to issue an evacuation order. Surely we need to speed that up, don't we? Or find a way to speed that up. I mean, it's not much use And I understand we don't want to cry wolf, and we need to be cautious before we make a decision. But we also need to be timely. And, I think the cell phone is actually the best way to get a message out. But even that's not much use if you're slow in making the decision in the first place. So I guess we need to find a way to do that quicker. And what's the process to achieve that?
Yeah, so unfortunately, a lot of that sits beyond our influence. So what that 40 to 75 minutes is based upon is the alerting systems in place that NEMA have in place. So if there is, our greatest threat is a local source tsunami, which can reach us within under 60 minutes. The equipment that NEMA has in place, not NEMA, sorry, GNS Science have in place, are a series of dart buoys on the ocean floor, which measure waves that come above them in terms of their height. There is a series of GNS becoming aware, them waiting on the data that comes from the alerting system, them then informing NEMA pulling together the expert panel, making a decision, and then it comes down the chain from group to us. So there is quite a significant process, unfortunately, involved in all of that. And just this most recent simultaneous event we had, where we had Cyclone Cody and the Tongan eruption. A good example of that is GNS's monitoring equipment that sat on Rural Island, which would be the first alerting off that island, was taken out by Cody. So they never got that initial alert. The first alert only came from the dart buoy on the ocean floor. So you can already see the delay. And I suppose that is the real concern in terms of if we're waiting on notifications, that if those sirens, for example, are taken out, or the alerting mechanisms that they're using are taken out, it just shows the frailty of the system or the efficacy. There is always those concerns. But suffice to say, there is a process in terms of if everything is working well, there is a process before we are given those alerts locally.
Which I think supports the view from a scientific perspective that if people wait around for a siren to go, it's potentially too late. And I think that's what makes people, the professional people in civil defence, nervous, that people begin to rely on that and ignore the natural warnings. If I could just add to what Paula said about the planning, at the moment we have the red, orange, yellow zones, and you'll see those signs around the area. So that is very much what people should rely on at this point to do their planning. If you're looking to make your own family plan or your team's plan, use that. That's on our website and it's on the signboards. But as Paula has noted, that there is a project underway, and one of the consideration is to implement the blue line system that they have in Wellington, where on this side of the line you're safe, on this side you're not, which has its advantages and its disadvantages. The one advantage is it's simple. The other disadvantage, of course, is it seems a little bit simple for what is a complex situation. So we're encouraging people to use those red, orange, yellow lines at the moment so they can plan for today. And as time moves, that's part of the BAU awareness program that we will roll out if anything changes.
And I think through that, sorry, just to add to what Barbara had said, through our campaign, what we have also communicated quite thoroughly is for you, if this is your evacuation route, for you to practice that, but also to identify for yourself another evacuation route that in the event of an unfolding disaster, the evacuation route which we give you on your plan is no longer available. You have already given thought to where else might I or how else might I evacuate, because that's the reality within an unfolding disaster. Some of those routes may not be accessible any longer. So a lot of preparedness on the part of the community and towards their own resilience, which is really what we're aiming for.
This all underlines the importance of getting an early determination and advice out to people about how they can help themselves and what action they take in that emergency. Because it appears that we can't rely on the national system or the regional system to be responsive in a timely way.
I'm hoping part of the work we're going to do nationally, there are put out by UNESCO 12 indicators of a tsunami-ready community, which gives us some criteria to benchmark against, and a lot is owned by the community, but a lot of that, there's a real high emphasis on lots of drilling, lots of practicing, lots of education. Bought by GNS Science, it was released in 2017 around alerting tools, and in there they go so far as to say there is a significant focus on education to the extent that they even suggest quotas of staff to 1 to 25,000 members of population as well. So just saying we need to be doing a lot of the education, which certainly will be our absolute focus moving forward in terms of an annual work plan.
I thought Stephen was going to ask the question, but so I'll ask it because he hasn't. So it's all very well. So the message is, it's long, strong, get gone. That's fine if you're feeling the earthquake. That's a simple message. What happens if the earthquake's in Japan or in Tonga and you don't actually feel it that strongly? What is the answer for people then?
Madam Chair, the long, strong, or gone essentially relates to our most significant risk, which is a local source tsunami. That doesn't give us much time to respond on land. The ones that are further afield, we have more alerting time, we have more notification time. So yes, you may not feel it, but it gives sufficient time for the GNS Science notification process to give us those warnings. So in short, we have more time to play with the further afield it is, if it's a distal source tsunami versus a local one, which we no doubt would feel. Also part of the GNS Science piece of research was around the natural warnings being your most reliant, second being your official alerting tools, which are our EMAs and the Red Cross app that goes out. And the report speaks to that the emergency alerting, emergency management alert comes through your phone. So that one isn't an app. That one's pushed out through the different providers, which is the brilliance because people don't have to sign up for it. The Red Cross one you do have to sign up for. So what this piece of research suggests is that those tools, together with your informal, which is your those two tools, but as well as your social media, your television, radio, etc., typically would cover 70% of the community, and the remaining would be done by the informal channels where, and again, has been a real part of our education campaign, is check on your neighbour. If you've heard the alert, make sure that you're contacting others just to make sure that they've heard them as well. So there is a bit of research out there that gives us some indication, and that piece of research is really good as well because it does break down the different alerting mechanisms and gives a percentage of efficacy of them as well. And certainly those first two are quite solid. So again, if we can include that in our education in terms of making sure others are okay, and having some plan around that, it just increases our likelihood of the official warning that's been heard by some gets received by others as well.
So just because we're going to have to answer questions on this, so that EMA, that official, that is faster than waiting for them to notify regional, and then regional notifies at the local level. And if you had sirens, that's when the siren would go off, whereas the EMA would be pushed out by maybe, well, it could be a couple of minutes, but it could be 10 minutes earlier or whatever. Because people are going to say, in that case, then the sirens do actually form a part of notifying them for something that is a far away event.
And the notifications, once again, would have to have the same process before they are confident enough to issue that alert. So, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that would be pushed out simultaneously. Yeah. So the EMA would be issued if you had sirens. The sirens would be activated at the same time. Yeah. I suppose the thing around that is that the sirens would be great in areas where there is dark pockets, where there is no Wi-Fi, because the EMA doesn't rely on having data or anything like that. It just relies on there being Wi-Fi, and that sirens possibly in areas where there is no Wi-Fi would be maybe considered. But typically in our area, most people would have access to all that to receive those EMAs. Yeah.
Bill, you're happy to move?
Yes, happy to move, Chair. Acknowledging the work of staff and the community working group in this space. I think a great job to where we were when we started a year ago.
And shared second. Any further discussion? No. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Thanks. Tauranga Public Transport Joint Committee. Brendan. I think it's all pretty straightforward. I'm happy to move. You second? Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. And you're going to stay there for traffic and parking bylaw update.
This is the most exciting report of the whole meeting. No, only thing I'd say is these are just minor changes to the network that have either been requested by residents or are just required for operational reasons. There's nothing controversial in what's being proposed.
Shared seconding. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Brendan, before you go, can I just thank you and Andy for your work last week and the Links Avenue. I forgot to text you over the holidays to say, really appreciated, very professional presentation of the trial feedback and outlined, the general traffic issues that we're facing in the city, and listened to and took on board some of the feedback that the community was providing to us. And I think the commissioners felt that both you and Andy did an outstanding job. So thank you very much. Acknowledge that. I put that, didn't I? Yeah, I did. Okay. So got one more. We've got the late report, and then I think we'll break for lunch and come back after lunch and do public excluded. Okay, so late report is you, Gareth. Is that correct? Yes.
In the absence of Richard and Anne, who are travelling from Cameron Road, yes, I can probably talk to it. If we get any tricky questions, we might have to postpone till after lunch. Hey? Well, shall I just table the report as read then, and you ask your questions and we'll go from there? Fundamentally, we were just asking for an increase in the budget of the community grant fund to be included in the draft annual plan for consultation. And yeah, happy to answer any questions.
So I think the main issue for us is trying to get our heads around where the funding came from to fund the incubator and the Enviro Hub and those that we identified as partners beforehand. Here's Anne, you're saved by the bell. Welcome. We've only just started. So the main question that we're trying to get our heads around is we went out and consulted in the long-term plan. When we came back and had the discussions, there were a number of organisations that we identified that we wanted to be seen as partners. So we wanted them put into a partnership agreement that gave them maybe more funding, maybe longer term contracts, and recognise the role that they were playing with us in developing policy and, ongoing relationships. And most of those had already been funded in the past. So I guess what we're presented with now is saying, well, we've done all that, but we've used up all the money, so we want more money. Now that's my reading of this report. What we don't understand is they were funded before. So what's happened to that funding that we now need more money here?
I'm assuming they were funded out of grant funding.
That they were, but also some of them were only on fixed term agreements, so there was no more money. So the money in the last long-term plan had finished and it wasn't rolled over, and it got lumped into the community grant fund, and we went, oh, okay, whoops. And it chewed up a good $500,000 out of 1.8, which gave us less to invest in community grants. So there may have been something else that went on, but I know that was definitely a chunk of it.
So the request essentially is to lock in this partnership funding, but not necessarily commit that from the grant funding. It's to separate the two.
Yeah, it still is one fund, but yeah, we're acknowledging the fact that the partnership agreements chewed up a hell of a lot of the community grant fund that we hadn't allowed for. And that meant that the available funds in the community grant fund were, I mean, it was still a generous amount, but it didn't go anywhere near meeting the demand. And in terms of the current climate in the community, that demand is probably only going to go up. We can look to ring fence community partnerships so that in the future that's a very defined amount. And I guess that was always what happens when you establish a new fund. You test it out, you run a couple of rounds and go, okay, well, that didn't quite work, we'll tweak it. And so we're more than happy to look at that. And that might make it easier in the future for you to make decisions about whether or not, we do grant set up partnership agreements or not, because the money might all be gone.
Yeah, I must admit, I prefer that second option because I think what we had in mind when we talked about these strategic partnerships was exactly that they would be a longer term relationship with an organisation or a series of organisations to help us drive particular issues or outcomes. For example, we have a strategic partnership with Priority One, and it doesn't come through a community grants process. And we see the potential for organisations like EnviroHub, Social Link and others to have a longer term partnership with the council to drive certain outcomes. And I think that, to me, is what this is about, and we should wrap some parameters around what defines a strategic partnership and what we're seeking to get out of it, and then vote the money towards enabling that to happen, rather than seeing this as a sort of a grant process where they come cap in hand annual or 3 yearly basis. I don't think that's what we're talking about when we're talking a strategic partnership. So I'd like to see a proposal worked up in that regard. And happy to talk about money then.
I think Marty quite rightly mentions our surf lifesaving clubs that so there is quite a variety of groups that we do have strategic partnerships with that are long term of benefit to different parts of the community. And it just seems to me, I just can't get, this is the second conversation where we really are struggling with what we thought was quite a straightforward proposal in the long-term plan. And I have to say there's a lot of money in the community, particularly from central government, around this area of community grants, and particularly at this time with COVID. So I want to be absolutely clear that from the city's point of view, we've got those strategic partnerships right, and that we're funding the right things through our community grants. And I just don't see that here before we go, adding in another $500,000. I just don't. It isn't clear to me what we're actually trying to achieve. And that's no fault of anyone. I think we've just been talking a bit past one another or a bit round as this has been evolving. And I think we're at the point now where we need to stop and really get it sorted.
I'll see if Richard wants to add anything, but I think we're probably going to need to go and have a chat to the policy team, because I mean, we did approve a policy that set up a structure for the grant fund and partnerships to hang off. So if we might need to make a tweak to that for it to be fit for purpose for how you guys will see it operating. So there's no problem. Did you have anything to add, Richard?
Apologies. No, I think there's a lot of merit in what's actually suggested, because at the moment we have some partnership agreements that are being set up through the community grants fund, and we have other strategic agreements within Tauranga City Council. This is an opportunity to actually build one approach, and I think that was always, what was signalled with the community grants policy, but this is almost like stage 2, to try and get one framework for all of those.
I also, Chair, think it's quite timely given the work we're doing in terms of vision, the strategic refresh, because those partnerships and arrangements should contribute to those initiatives over time also.
I think we can just build up the right recommendations or framework for the annual plan process, and so that the money is going to the right place, and then we can make sure that the policy just fits and accommodates that. I think essentially we can bring all this information back tidied up as part of annual plan consideration. So as part of the initial report where you adopt the annual plan for consultation, we'll just make sure that it's all shaped up in that first report.
Do you need something from us today, or are you going to take it away?
Well, I think just receive the report and we can make sure that the information is brought back as part of the annual plan process.
Happy with that? Someone prepared to move that? Bill? Stephen? Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Sorry to rush across and we do that to you, but I think we'll get to a better place. Thank you. Right, so I now propose that we retreat downstairs. We adjourn.
Should we just?
Sorry. So we'll have the permission to go. Yes, we'll do that. So would someone like to move that we go into public excluded for the reasons outlined in the agenda? Bill moving, Stephen seconding. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We will adjourn, go for lunch, and we will come back at 1:30.